Sometimes someone asks a question that is really good and worthy of attention in a specific manner. And one of these was recently left by Miryam S. And she comments something that allows us kind of the opportunity to unpack OMAD a little. So the question is multifaceted, and we're going to unpack some of this. Hopefully it's going to be helpful to you. So Joe, thank you for your content. It certainly gives us an out-of-the-box approach to beating obesity. Now, out-of-the-box approach doesn't really mean anything except for the fact that everything you see on YouTube at any given time is the changing of food preferences, the fad diets that pop up. So I'm being looked at as an out-of-the-box way of controlling overeating, but it's really not the case. It's just controlling overeating. More on that in a minute. You have mentioned in another video that dominant macro meals are more effective in digestion and that they don't overload the body nearly as much as meals mixed with carbs and proteins. Can you go into more detail on this? Why is it eating high carb OMAD with little fat or protein doesn't cause weight gain? And then she goes on, we'll unpack each part. So first of all, the reason for carb or protein dominant meals or fat dominant meals being easier to digest is that they require less stomach acid, because they're competing fuel sources. So if you go and you eat a lot of simple carbohydrates like starches, your body burns them off quicker. So your stomach acidity has less of a job to do. If you go the other route and you have a high protein or high fat meal, you're gonna rely on different gut microbiome, different gut bacteria to digest it. And it may be longer time to digest something like protein or certain greens, but you're still ultimately going to have that putrefaction going on in there that is not producing a conflict. And when you talk about beans, we're going to unpack this a little bit more about legumes and how there's so much conflict in the way your body breaks them down, and that's why a lot of people cannot handle stuff like legumes. So, but the reason for that is simple stomach acidity. And as you age, the worse a time you have making enough acidity to digest the food, which is why you have so much of an explosion. This is why you have so much of an explosion in terms of carnivore movements, because people are trying to get away from all of these offensive things they can't digest. There's really nothing more than that. I read that high insulin promotes fat storing and is triggering by consuming high carb foods. Do you recommend certain types of carbs, white over brown rice, for example? Now, here's where we stop and talk about the Jason Fung people. The Jason Fung people are their own breed, because Jason Fung is popular for this analogy of the traffic cop directing your body to stop storing insulin and making enough insulin. And so every time I hear people that talk about insulin promoting fat storage, I know that they're Jason Fung people. This is misleading. It's true that high insulin produces fat. There's never been an issue there. But the issue is, it's not just that. Because when you do consume higher insulin foods like starches or even processed carbs, you do get the insulin hit that also triggers in your brain a sense of satiety, which is why when you've been doing carnivore for a long time and you get unbelievable sugar cravings, your body's trying to get that feeling of, I'm full again. And if you can manage that without going to extremes like carnivore, or at least not staying in that state for too long, you'll find that you're more satisfied and therefore less prone to binge. So it's not just a question of you making insulin. If you eat a big plate of rice, you're gonna make more insulin than if you ate chicken. But you're not gonna get the hit from the chicken that says we're full now. And you're not gonna get your body to release the proper insulin to take down the carbs that you consumed, which means you're still gonna stay in a kind of a hungry state. You might think, well, I'll adapt eventually. Yes, you will, but it's going to be a harder row to hoe than if you had just allowed yourself some sugar. So this silliness about high insulin promotes fat storage, there are other factors to consider, even though it's true. In terms of white over brown rice, I believe white is the easiest to digest, and I know this to be true. Brown rice is really unhealthy because it has a fibrous husk on it that is hard to digest. And there are actually videos to this effect. You're much better going with white rice, and I'm never going to get rid of my white rice. You also recommended, that's moving on, you also recommend multiple times vegetarian over flesh food for enhanced health benefits and energy. What do you think about dairy and eggs? I've kind of changed my stance a little bit, by the way, on vegetarian over flesh food. It depends on what you can digest. I've moved toward a more 50-50 rather than just plant foods. That I can go into at another point. Dairy and eggs, dairy is like milk is always going to make it more difficult to lose weight because of precisely what we're talking about. It spikes carbs and fat together and protein together. And as a result, if you have really any dairy, you're going to slow your weight loss tremendously. Eggs are not really that way, but they are a growth. They have a lot of testosterone producing effects. They have a lot of protein, which breaks down to insulin. It causes you to grow. And that's why if you have 6 to 10 to 8 eggs a day, you have the propensity to grow muscles and increase your strength versus if you don't. So in that sense, if you eat vegetation, if you eat starches, you will be more prone to lose weight overall because eggs and dairy and protein and animal products are more prone to growth as opposed to weight loss, even though you hold less water when you consume them. One of the criticisms of processed food is you hold a lot of water. You go out and have pizza and Chinese food and different things that cause you to hold water. The salt and the sugar causes you to hold water. The animal products, if you divide them and have just meat, for instance, you won't have that trouble. Dairy, however, you will, because dairy says grow, grow, grow. Do you think it's cancer promoting like many doctors claim? No, not really. Yeah, it can be, but it depends on what your body can handle. And I can share story after story of people who are year after year smokers, chain smokers, and they don't get cancer ever. I knew a woman who was 110 years old, old Methodist woman in Central Texas, and she died in her sleep, smoked like a chimney every day of her life, and you and I can both share lots of examples like that. Basically, it's what your body can handle, but I no longer believe that you should too much worry about cancer. I don't think that you should be too extreme in any form of eating. Moving on, what's your take on lectins? Found pretty much nightshades, peanuts. Some doctors say they are poisonous to our bodies, even if these foods are cooked. Lectins are not a thing. That's like Dr. Gundry, one of the biggest nutcases today. Unless we can summarize all of this with oxalates and everything else. These things are real, but they're not going to hurt you unless you are sensitive to them. If you are sensitive to nightshades, and I know a lot of middle-aged Midwest white women who are, for no reason. They didn't abuse them, their body just doesn't agree with them, then you should not eat them. This is no different than my own journey with oxalates and my kidney stone not too long ago. I did some things that were not wise and I overwrought my body. And as a result, I went on a temporary low oxalate diet, which I still am mostly favoring, but I have brought in normal foods. Of course, the reason that people get afraid of things is because they feel like it's an all or nothing deal. It's not. Usually it's 1 or 2 foods you can't handle. But I would stay away from worries about lectins or anything else unless you know that you have a sensitivity to certain things, aka greens and kidney stones or almonds and kidney stones, using myself as an example. Do you consider beans, carbs, or protein? Here's where we get back to one of the things that has changed my thinking on this. Since going low oxalate, I have noticed that when I got rid of beans and brought them back in, I realized I had a lot more gastrointestinal upset than I realized I had, because these beans don't want you to eat them. If I eat black-eyed peas, if I eat field peas, I don't have that trouble, but if I eat Mayakoba beans or pinto beans, I kind of have more trouble than I had before. This is not to say I don't eat them or can't eat them, but I notice a difference because the bean doesn't want to be eaten. And it's trying to resist you. It's trying to reproduce itself. So there is some truth to allergic foods. As far as what beans are, they are, I would classify them more as a protein, although most people who take them find that there are blood sugar benefits, there's fiber benefits, but they are also very irritative to certain people. And this is something I have noticed on my journey. Mixing beans with carbs spikes blood sugar, I know it would probably help with blood sugar. But the problem would be eating something you're not tolerant of. In some people who, when they consume carbs, they have blood sugar issues, but they notice that there's always a difference. So, for instance, there is blood sugar reactions from beans, and there's blood sugar reactions from potatoes or rice. Some people can handle some and some cannot others. If you have trouble with blood sugar, all you can do is eat the foods that are less offensive to you and that give you the most energy, and they don't set you back. What's the stevia brand you like? I don't have one. Whatever is available in Target or Walmart or Kroger, wherever I go. The ones I've tried have a terrible aftertaste. Yes, this is true. I don't use it much. I only use it if I want some sweet tea, but I want to keep fasting. As far as people that tell you maltodextrin is going to kill your body, they're not telling the truth. It's not going to do anything to you. It will be generous of you if you could show us examples of dominant macro meals and what mistakes to avoid. There's really no mistakes. Eat what you know is conducive to more energy. I will post up some meals on this, but basically if you can stay with the 70-30% rule, you'll find that you can have bread, a bread dominant meal. You can have I don't recommend wheat bread because for the grains tend to be, I do believe the carnivores are onto something, and there is a lot that can go wrong with grains on this. So if you'll keep the 70-30 rule, have some protein dominance, have some carb dominance, you're not going to run into these sorts of troubles, and before you know it, you'll be realizing that your time spent fasting is a lot easier than if you had done otherwise. That said, it's not going to blow the roof off of anything. You'll get the results if you stay consistent. So I hope this has helped today. You guys have a good one. Stay dry.